So welcome to the Trust and Influence in B2B podcast. I'm your host, Joel Harrison. Now, what does the current period of economic uncertainty mean for the longer term future of B2B marketing roles and team structure? That's a really pressing issue, which is on lots of people's minds and lots of conversations I've been having over the last few months. And that's the subtext for today's episode, for which I'm joined by two fantastic guests with very different perspectives on this challenge. And I'll introduce them very, very shortly. Before we get into that, some background on this podcast. Trust and Influence in B2B has a very broad remit, as the name suggests, covering the evolving challenges associated with generating trust and influencing buyers in all areas of B2B. These are very tough challenges, but they've taken on new levels of urgency and resonance in what is a very, very fast-changing landscape. Episodes released weekly. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, or rate this episode or the podcast itself. So, back to our theme today. Over the past couple of years, something shifted in B2B marketing, and you can see it most clearly, not in campaigns, but in careers. Marketing teams seem to be getting smaller. Budgets definitely seem to be getting tighter. Roles are being rewritten or removed altogether. And many marketers, including very, very senior ones, are discovering that the recruitment market now operates by very different rules to the ones that shaped their careers earlier on. But recruitment isn't just about jobs. It's a signal of trust. It shows what organizations trust marketing to own, what they trust it to influence, and what they no longer trust it with at all. Or perhaps they never trusted it in the first place. And right now, those trust boundaries are being redrawn under pressure from economic uncertainty, generative AI, and a growing demand for certainty from boards and CEOs. So in this episode, we're going to use recruitment as a lens to understand how trust in marketing is changing, what skills are being trusted, what capabilities are being outsourced, and what this means for the future of marketing leadership. I'm joined today by Jon Watton, a B2B marketing leader who's been directly within the market and one of the most prominent B2B marketers in kind of corporate life, certainly in the UK for the last many years now. And Tom Howe from Jefferson Group, who has a front row seat in how hiring is changing across the industry. Together, we'll explore what this moment tells us about trust and influence in the shape of B2B marketing teams. So, Jon, Tom, welcome to you both.
Hello. Thank you for your time.
Having said I'd introduce you both separately, I'll then introduce you together. So never mind, we'll just plow on from that. So I've invited you both here as you've got unique, different perspectives, the same challenges. So very, very excited to dig into what you're seeing and how you're experiencing this. So, Jon, I'm going to start with you as the client-side marketer in this conversation. You've been directly in, and perhaps you might want to give us a bit of background to yourself in just a second. You've been directly in the recruitment market recently. How would you describe the reality of it for senior B2B marketers right now?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no problem. So thanks, Joel. Well, first of all, just to frame the kind of segment that I'm in, B2B is quite broad. I'm in B2B tech and in that software and software as a service. So that's the kind of space I'm in. So most of my experiences have been in that sort of sub-vertical. Listen, it's really tough. Having sort of been in and out of the market over the last, 10, 20 years, I'd say the last 2 years have been the toughest for senior marketers, driven by a whole lot of things I think we'll come to. But I would say it's just accelerated so much and it's really, really hard. Two things. One, if you're a senior marketing leader, then often those sort of senior progression roles are in the bigger tech companies and those are going away to some of the sort of trends that you mentioned. And then secondly, I think in smaller, medium-sized businesses, I really do think there's a sort of a crisis of confidence around what marketing is and what sort of seniority they need in that organization. I think those two things together just mean it's a really tough market at the moment.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I really appreciate you being candid about this as well. I mean, I guess that you talk. I've asked you from the perspective of a senior marketer, but I guess also you've got connections in terms of the people who work for you over the years, right? And marketers in junior roles, and so you get your second hand getting a perspective about what it's like for perhaps more junior marketers.
Yes, I mean, the stories are profligate. You see them many times on LinkedIn, right? It's full of whatever your level, junior, mid or senior. It's hard to get roles. Roles kind of disappear. Maybe, blimey, do we call it a traditional challenge using something like LinkedIn to find jobs? I think that's a hiding to nothing. No responses, no comeback, automatic rejections. You get into a process, you get ghosted. I'm hearing this across, all of the levels. And you say from people who've been in my teams, peers to me, even people more senior to me, it really is across the board, propagated again by, some of the things you talked about earlier around kind of companies trying to sort of reduce their cost, look at the most efficient go-to-market, react to some very strong, kind of market conditions, and of course, try and accommodate this whole wave of AI.
Okay, that's great, Jon. Thank you for that. It's really great kind of level set. But Tom, you're seeing this as well. This is the world you're working in every day because you're working for companies and you're working for individuals as well. How are you seeing this?
So it was interesting. I'm just listening to Jon and he's right. But some people would say it feels like the perfect storm, but I don't think that's the right words. I think what we're witnessing is a generational change. I think we're witnessing a realignment of marketing teams and what is expected of marketing teams at the moment. I also think where we need to anchor all of this and try to keep a bit of perspective is that we're on the hangover of COVID years. In COVID, recruitment went up astronomically. If you look at the charts, we were seeing 200-300% lift on activity over 2020 to 2023, and that's globally, not just in the UK market. And I think we are witnessing a realignment of downturn from overhiring because the needs were different back then to, yes, you've got AI coming in, which I'm sure will come out through this conversation, and budget shift on what is a marketer responsibility now in this new world because of what people are using AI for. So we are back down. I would say the numbers on job opportunities, we're back to pre-2018, which is a fairly normal level. What happens in the next 5 years, that's up for debate, I think.
So I guess, Tom, what I'm reading about is a really helpful testimony. Part of this, we're in danger of seeing it perhaps worse than it might be. We're back to 2018 levels, which may not be great, but it's not brilliant. The danger is you're comparing it with a ridiculous boom time, one of the biggest boom times in the market. That's one of the reasons why it perhaps feels as bad as it is. Am I sugaring the pill a little bit there too much, or is that a fair summation of what you're trying to say?
No, you are right. I think people at the moment, business owners and leaders, are trying to navigate stormy waters because they've got the global economy at the moment to think about as well, and where investment's going to come from. And I think we're seeing a rise in brand story as well, and somehow linking that into measurable marketing activity. But I wouldn't say doom and gloom. I don't think you should be coasting it. I think we're in a position that we recognise. We're not used to the factors of the back end of a boom time, which you just said. And I think people are getting a little bit of whiplash from going from one extreme to the other.
Well, Jon, how do you reflect on what Tom said there? Whiplash is something expression here quite a bit in the current environment.
Yeah, I mean, listen, as of course I exist within businesses, so, and have done, and, always appreciate the realities of where we are. I mean, if I was honest, some of the organizations that I was part of, yes, probably did, we're a little bit sort of bloated, needed sort of a little bit of adjustment. I mean, I think, as you say, sort of post-COVID, a lot of technology companies, sort of overhired, and probably, do we really need all those people? And when I talk to some, smaller businesses, like, who are at the sort of 100 million ARR kind of level. So, in our world, that's medium to large, but probably medium size. And they have 100 marketers in their organization. Even I say, what do all those people do? I have no idea what they would do. So absolutely, I think it's been a huge course correction happening very quickly, on the back of, even 5 years ago, the war for talent. We struggled to hire people. We couldn't find people with the right experience. And, maybe it was slightly easier to get into organizations, and then to secure that talent, we would probably pay a little bit over the odds to get that talent. Things have shifted dramatically. I think generally, the sort of size of teams and the growth that I expect hasn't come. And then, as you say, I wouldn't call it a perfect storm, but it's also been accelerated by AI coming to market at the same time, which has just created this kind of huge course correction. I think a correction was always coming, but it's been quite massive. And, like anything, it's not the end of marketing. It's just the opportunity to sort of reset and then, kind of, build for the next phase. And, it's ever been like that, right, over the 20 or 30 years that I've been doing it.
Yeah, it's a very pragmatic way of looking at it. We need the kind of marketing that we need. We don't need the kind of marketing that perhaps we had 5 or 10 years ago.
I mean, the cliche within any business is build the team for the future, not build the team for the past. And I think there's a lot of that right now. And I do think marketing teams will be leaner than they have been. As if you alluded to, Joel, powered by technology, we had all the technology that's come along, web, email, marketing automation, mobile technology, apps, all have been ways in which social media have been ways in which we've been trying to scale up and do things much more efficiently. And here's another sort of massively accelerated, technology. So we've always been on that sort of journey, and it does feel very brutal at the moment, but, out of that, I'm pretty positive, the things will settle, and, we'll all know kind of what's going to be for the next 3 to 5 years, but it's a bit early now, I think.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I mean, I think I love how you've positioned this as a rational exercise, but I can't help thinking that it's not completely rational exercise and part of everybody in that decision-making journey. Tom, I'm going to pick on you. Do you think John's being a bit generous in suggesting that this is rational as he implies it, or do you think there's a little bit of kind of irrational behavior going on here in terms of marketing being perhaps deprioritized or investment not being originated as fast as it could be?
Yeah, no, I don't say it's been deprioritized. I think it's definitely more caution in the air, but I think you're seeing a definite shift in what businesses want from their marketing teams right now. And look, all three of us here, we've lived and breathed the measured marketing of B2B for a number of years, but when it's an investment versus results, I think that's where the nervousness is coming into. And Jon's absolutely spot on. I mean, when he talks about the team dynamics are shifting as well, and what we wanted 5 years ago from our marketing teams has definitely changed. I mean, the briefs now are definitely poles apart from what they were 5 years ago. And also, I don't know if it was you, Joel, who mentioned, no, it was Jon actually, you mentioned about in the COVID years, the salaries, because there was a war on talent. People were overspending on getting, I'm talking about 10, sometimes 20% lift on salaries just to try and attract the right people. Now, somewhere down the line, that was always going to have a knock-on effect on budget spend and investment.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have rationalized a very crazy market at the moment. I don't think people... So there's the rational Uber trend, right? The macro kind of view of things. And you have to be pragmatic, Joel, otherwise you go mad. But the reality is people don't know what they want right now. Most, when I talk to, companies who are looking for typically CMOs or marketing leaders, depending on their size, they really don't know what they want. It is back to, we kind of know it when we see it. They want everything. They don't want to pay as much as they used to. They put everything on the table, and, they're just kind of feeling their way. So that's why I'm saying it will all shake out. I think, over the course of this year, we had the big shock from AI last year. Now you go into an interview and a CEO is sitting there going, well, why does it take you 90 days to write a marketing plan when I've just gone into ChatGPT and got one out in 5 minutes? And these are real situations. Or, you need some time to give me a digital strategy, but I can do that right now. So you're against that sort of backdrop of how hard can it be, which is always be the dynamic of marketing, right? How hard can it be? But so I think people are feeling the way, and then ultimately, in a lot of searches that I hear of and have been involved in, they decide not to hire anyone. They will just make do whilst we kind of work things through. So there's a lot of that, right? And we've got a team that can get us through, and do we need a leader? So I'm talking sort of senior positions. So it is crazy right now. And that's why I said the sort of my top comment was, I think there's a sort of an identity crisis. People aren't really sure what they want from marketing, apart from everything.
Okay, you've beautifully segued the next question. But before I go on to that one, though, Tom, any thoughts on what Jon's just said there?
I was just going to add, it did make me chuckle a little bit. I mean, I think the one thing to keep in mind is job security. I think there are people who are still in position. I'm talking about senior leadership levels of decision making, I think they are driven more cautiously on spend than ever before, because I think a lot of jobs are dependent on results. Everybody needs to push a sale or a product or service, and whatever they invest, they need to make sure it's measured, results led in some shape or form. But I think there is so much caution, and even in the AI field, where we start talking about, is it making life easier for us by using AI and knocking up a marketing strategy in 60 seconds on ChatGPT, which that's actually not a joke. I know many people use it as a framework and build off the back. What I will say though is, and Jon, again, you're spot on when it talks about, you go through that. I hear so many stories, and I'm party to some of them, where we go through interview processes which last sometimes months, 2 to 3 months. And then there's still no job at all for anybody at the end of it, because they think they need it. They're planning ahead, and then there's something happens in the world that changes the investments, and all of a sudden they put the brakes on them. They stop, go, we're just going to wait another 3 months, and then they wait again for things to pick back up again, and it's stop again. It's too little confidence at the moment, and I think that's definitely playing into the recruitment field, unfortunately.
That's a fantastic summary and kind of observations about where we are right now from two different angles. I really appreciate that, guys. I think what I want to try and do is got that kind of grounding where we are right now, is then try and look a bit above that in terms of what this says about the bigger picture of where B2B marketing sits within organizations, and perhaps what it says about the future. I mean, we've convinced ourselves it's going to be okay because it's all going to rebalance out in the future, but actually what does that future landscape look like? And I guess kind of key question for you, Jon, is when you're speaking to hiring companies or companies that are hiring, what do they genuinely seem to trust marketing leaders with today, and what are perhaps they less willing to trust marketing leaders?
Well, I think the reality is they probably don't trust marketers to do much. I mean, that because they don't know what they want. They don't want to pay much, for someone who's got a lot of experience. And, typically they would say, well, we need to, improve awareness of our brand in this market. We're not particularly well known, or or whatever. We need to reposition ourselves. They say, okay, that's great. And then they say, yeah. And so we need to generate some leads in the next, 3 to 4 weeks. And you go, okay, well, those are two different things, but okay, fine. That's the job of a marketer. I think you gain that trust. So I think anyone who's taking these roles is having said that, if it does click, I do see a lot of companies who are looking for someone they can trust to do the job. The challenge is you have to deliver short-term impact whilst you build the longer-term kind of plan. And so I think they're willing to trust, someone, but, typically it's, do things really quickly in the next, in the first 30 days, 60 days. And often, you enter a sort of framework of trust. That's very grand, doesn't it? But very quickly, I think as a marketer, you have to establish, here's my impact. This is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to deliver on it. So I think all that chaos, I think they are still looking for someone who they can trust, who knows marketing. I always say the great thing about marketing, and I say this with the tongue in my cheek, is that everyone has an opinion. So isn't that fantastic? So they all have opinions, but I do think, they do start with that area. We want to find someone we can trust to do the job.
Thank you, Jon. What I'm taking from that, I mean, in many ways, that sounds like maybe a distilled microcosm of what has always been the challenge for marketing leader, right? It's just that it's more acute now because everyone's. It sounds to me, what the anecdotes I hear, the picture I'm getting is that people are thinking incredibly short term. They're wanting immediate commercial returns, and they kind of know they probably should be thinking long term, but there are so many kind of warning signs, klaxons going off the background. You can't think long term. You've got to do something now, and so they're trying to find a marketer to convince them that they're going to do something in the short term, but the longer term is where it's at. So it's still that kind of, and that is about, as you say, it's about building trust for the longer term. But it's that criticality of that commercial thinking, that acumen, that sense of being able to convince someone longer term about what it is they should be doing. Tom, do you agree with that? I mean, is it just a kind of a more distilled version of what's always been the case, or is it something more profoundly different happening right now?
I tell you, one thing we're definitely seeing a shift on right now. Again, I mean, trust is always at the heart of anything when it comes to hiring at a senior level. But I think what we're definitely witnessing at the moment is a need for more specialists, so people in a particular areas. So if you've operated in, let's say, the tech space or the automotive space or manufacturing, industry insights are suddenly becoming even more valuable than I think it was before, because we used to see a little bit more industry crossover. If you had the basic skill sets within, say, the B2B arena, wider B2B arena, it wasn't impossible to move you into slightly different verticals. That's kind of changed now. There is definitely, if you come with actual industry knowledge that's relevant to what clients are trying to achieve, that's point number one. Two, though, results, absolutely. And it's always been there. Let's be honest. We had a little bit more of a breathing space, going back from the 90s onwards from my time. But now everybody wants results yesterday. So again, Jon is spot on. You're anchored in what can I deliver in 6 months, but businesses should be looking more long term at what marketing deliverables look like and the reality of it, on invest for long term. But they don't tend to focus too much on that. They're more about Jan. What's that saying? Jan today. Is that yeah? I think that's the phrase it goes. And that's definitely on the up. Now, the one other thing I was going to add to that comment was, again, because of the introduction of AI and people getting more and more familiar with it, we're starting to see more of a diamond shape. So we are back into seeing more senior level hires coming in, but businesses wanting more immediate results. But we're seeing less at the junior levels, and then you've got blowed out middle management trying to pick up the pieces in between. So yeah, it's a definitely interesting times.
Yeah, I think most jobs advertised are for 10 plus years experience, where I see, by which they mean 10 years experience. So, so if you've got 10 years experience, so that's say your early 30s, you might have got 2 or 3 years of manager experience, but you certainly haven't been through the last financial crisis. You haven't been through COVID. You weren't working in a managerial position during COVID, let alone everything else before that. So it's a lot to ask of middle managers who've never had that experience, just as we enter some of the, even more critical economic shifts, So it's an interesting talent problem that they're building, these companies who just want someone with 10 years experience because they've got no leadership experience through difficult times.
Spot on.
I think just back to the point about, I agree that, the point about the wanting someone with a specialist knowledge. I mean, in some respects, that's a logical thing because it's just evidence of them wanting someone who can hit the ground running faster. But the opportunity to get someone who's got the right skills, who can grow the business and thinks truly strategically, possibly is being compromised by that desire to have that immediate impact. So we're all thinking, it all feels to me like it's all about the shorter term and the more immediate term. And actually, strategically, marketing should be your growth driver in the long term. It shouldn't be your short term activation. So look, we've kind of slightly deviated from a highly orchestrated conversation plan, which I put together earlier, which is highly predictable given that I've got two people with lots of experience and lots of opinions. So, but we've talked about the fact that actually what we're seeing here is a longer term kind of shift in terms of how organizations are recruiting, and perhaps this will play out in terms of in the kind of immediate term and return to something more like normality. But do you think there's a broader shift in terms of actually how teams are going to be structured? We're going to get marketing teams look different to what they looked more recently. Are we? Do we agree that this is a potentially a longer term shift in the kind of resources that you might need on the ground? Tom, you're nodding there.
Yeah, it just resonates so much with what I'm seeing at the moment. I think the marketing teams you're starting to see evolve right now is probably much going to be the future. I think we're going to see smaller marketing teams indefinitely. I don't think we're going to go back to certainly weren't bloated, but in comparison to where we are today, it would seem bloated. I think we're going to be expecting more from less, again, because of technology advancement, which is probably not rocket science to most of the people here. But I think you're going to see senior leadership take on more responsibilities. And I think you're going to see a stronger middle management. And I think we're going to worry it's short-sighted, unfortunately. We're going to have less juniors. The problem we're going to have in 5 years' time, of course, with so little junior opportunities. And we're talking about we're already 2 years behind right now, the guys. If you think about it, we haven't seen a usual burst of graduate programs that we used to see coming into the market like pre-2020. They've been drastically reduced. So the people of the managers for tomorrow, in 3 years' time, there aren't going to be there. Now, technology will do some of it, but, and this probably now moves more into Jon's territory than mine, but my fear is when we're relying so heavily on AI for marketing expertise or framework, shall we say, the worry where I think we're going to witness in marketing is AI fatigue, and where differentiators, it becomes harder to differentiate between sort of, basic, typical AI-generated marketing activity, which is going to be fairly bulk standard. And it's now, have you noticed, because of technology, smaller businesses can now get the same playing field on a lot smaller budget than the big boys who have bigger budgets that normally make a bigger splash. And I think somewhere down the line in the next coming years, we're going to see a fatigue, and it's going to be about how do you differentiate yourself.
Tom, I totally agree with that, and that's one of the points of this podcast around that notion of trust. But the AI thing is the elephant in the room. But before we dive into that, and I just want to kind of play some of that to Jon, because it sounds like we're saying is the marketing teams, the recruitment at the bottom rung is being curtailed or suspended anyway, and recruitment at the top is harder because they're not prepared to invest or give people the time. So what you've got is this squashed middle in actual. Is that right?
Yeah, totally. It's like life in general, right? We've got the squeeze middle where, people are looking after their parents and after their children, right? So it's the same thing. We're asking a lot of that kind of middle managers who have some experience, maybe not experience, to do some of the more strategic stuff. Because ultimately, when you're a marketing leader in a reasonable sized business, you have to stand, toe to toe, nose to nose with experienced CEO, CRO, CFO, those still have very senior people and really argue a case or defend or put things forward. And that's a lot to ask of someone who's got a couple of years experience. Not that it can't be done, but, it's a tall order for many. And then, as you say, all those graduate programs are going, there are internships, are going. A lot of, even you could say, look, the jobs don't exist for junior staff right now to do, because we are doing them in AI to, do some workflow, some simple content creation, all of that, we can do with AI a lot easier. And so absolutely, we've got that sort of squash middle of marketers, and they're just, being, pulled in every direction, has to be strategic, then has to do stuff, and has to do things without teams, and has to do it with no sort of administrative support, and it's a lot to ask for them. So again, I'm pragmatic. I think it will balance out. To Tom's point, I think 2025 was the year of saying we don't need all these senior people. They're far too expensive. What do they do anyway? Let's just have some, the next level down. We don't need any junior talent. And I think what people are realizing now is they do need a sprinkling of experienced people who can help guide the AI, if that's how they're going to do a lot of stuff, and understand what good looks like.
I think I completely agree. It feels like a level of the gloss has got to wear off AI to an extent, hasn't it? That it is just a panacea and everything fast, because as we know, it's about interpretation, it's about prompting and about questioning it as well. So I mean, but just the point around AI, there's obviously AI presents this incredible opportunity. And Tom, perhaps I'll go to this with you on this one first of all. And so we're seeing this kind of like hope or trust in AI. How much of this challenge we're seeing in terms of the kind of the challenge that the marketing profession, B2B marketing profession is going through, how much is just about the opportunity of trust in AI, and how much is actually about an equal decline in trust in human judgment? Yeah, because as Jon made the point earlier on, we're starting to, often companies aren't prepared to put their trust in human beings. So there's a kind of like one's coming up, one's coming down. Does that make sense?
It's funny that you say that, because I think we're not a million miles away from actually a reversal, because it wasn't necessarily, I don't think it's about trust in marketeers that's been eroded. I think it's about cost and investment. So what I'm definitely witnessing, talking to both marketers on client side and marketers on agency side, I've got clients turning around to me saying to well-known global agencies, we want you to use AI, but off the back of that, we want you to reduce our spend with you by 20% because you're using AI. So they're thinking of savings coming in. So then you're thinking agencies are going, right, okay, we're going to now invest in AI. Everyone's trying to do it. So what type of AI you think is going to be more suitable? But you've then got the other issue is that what AI is creating and how much you lean on AI from whether it's through marketing messaging or content creation or creativity, and then trying to, again, come back to differentiators to actually make it stand out. And I won't again name names, but there's a well-known global agency who had said to me in one meeting, said it's a race to the bottom with AI because we need to hit the bottom first and then rebuild up. And what we think we're going to start to see imminently is the trust moving back into human again, into human marketers who understand the nuances that AI can't deliver on. I mean, AI should be a tool, a bit like we all are of an age now where we were all present for the witness of when things like Photoshop and Quark Express and technologies came in to change the way creative industry operated. Well, this is almost that 2.0 and some. And I think at the moment, we're still trying to find our footing. But my honest belief is that I think we're going to come back into relying on senior marketers who understand the balance between AI and human intervention and how to manipulate to get the results that we need.
Jon, I'm sure you're going to agree with that. I mean, is it just building on that? Do you think it's about the marketing leader of the future of the next 5 years it's about their ability to convince the people hiring them, the CEO and the CIO and the other rest of the C-suite, that they understand that these marketers know how to get the value out of AI and what to do or what not to do. It's about also being able to pitch your case around how you're going to use AI as the tool to take marketing forward.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If I was hiring someone, or indeed when I work with agencies, over the last few years, I'm disappointed if AI isn't in the conversation because I expect it to be used because there is efficiencies and cost savings and other things. Ultimately, it's a great way to sort of bring in different perspectives, but you need to manage it all. It's a great set of tools. And so often, what I'm doing, and I know we'll come on to it maybe in a bit, but I'm more in the fractional world now. And the first question is, how are you going to use AI to help us? And how do we use AI? And, the team, is nervous around it. And so everyone wants to embrace it. It's just making sure that, you're using it as a, intelligent tool, not something that is kind of autopiloting you somewhere that you don't want to go. And I think it's a great thing. I mean, I was at Adobe, so, familiar with those tools. We've had tools that have democratized, creative video, music, self-publishing in books. There's more out there. It puts it in the reach of much smaller businesses, allows them to punch above their weight. There's still room for great marketing. There's still room for, bad marketing. You might argue more companies are going to do bad marketing, but still the winners will be those, I think, that, harness that blend of AI and human ingenuity to differentiate and stand out. And right now, AI is very much almost like a manual process. It's there's a lot of talk around automating a lot, but right now it is tools at the disposal of people. And if those people can use them in a smart way, then they'll do smart things. But if you don't know how to use them, it's not gonna get you anywhere.
Yeah, I don't put it to understand that isn't necessarily apparent to those who are not working in marketing because they just see a quick way to do something. Jon, as you teased, you alluded earlier on, the kind of the crux of the conversation already you had been talking for 35 minutes, but we've had, it's been such a great conversation. I'm happy with this, with our kind of segues or our kind of meandering. It's all, what's the model of the future going to look like? And this is the big question. You talked about being fractional. We've talked about AI, obviously, AI is taking a lot of resolve. We're talking about freelancers, agencies, offshoring, embedded teams, agencies, models being perhaps less centralized, more of a constellation. I had a great podcast I did with Stuart Giddens from B2. So, are we seeing trust being kind of more distributed across a broader ecosystem? Is that what's going on, Jon?
I think so. So firstly, so there's like the alternatives to permanent positions, and I guess what's new into the mix is this idea of fractional kind of roles. So fractional leaders. So I'm a fractional leader for a couple of companies, and that works very well. Where they have a small in-house team, they're looking for someone to come in and maybe reboot what they're doing. They need someone who can join the dots a bit, build a strategy, put in measurement and help show the impact of what marketing is doing. And you can do that fractionally. So trusting someone like me as sort of a fractional resource is probably something new to the mix. Everything else, we've been doing for years. I mean, 10 years ago at Adobe, we were very much about looking at the agency model, right? We used to outsource all of the doing to agencies. And actually, 10 years ago, we wanted to make sure we were digitally savvy. So we brought a lot of that in-house, but still use agencies for more strategic counsel, maybe for more, creative, ideas and helping us with big campaigns. But we didn't need to be sort of outsourcing the doing because we wanted it to be in our DNA. And I think, there's a lot of that now with AI. You want your team to be living and breathing AI and the latest kind of techniques, but using maybe, a range of resources that allow you to manage those costs. So, you have a cost base and then you can flex that by using freelancers. So some of the companies I work with, you have a small internal marketing team using me as a fractional CMO, but then have, 2 or 3 or 4 specialist freelancers who help with paid media, SEO, sometimes copywriting, sometimes other bits and pieces. And I think we've opened up a whole bunch of new models that work. And I think whilst it's challenging for senior leaders to get these positions in some companies, those same companies, like the idea of getting, a part of a senior person because they get a lot of bang for their buck. And of course, senior people like me are, of course, supercharged by AI. So you get even more Jon for your money, so, or anyone else. So, it's a great benefit for me because, I've got 2 or 3 little assistants who are running around helping me, So definitely, I think the model's changing. And I think that's what we'll see over the course of this year is probably small internal teams, refocused on making business impact, realize what the business is doing. So another adjustment. But then looking at some kind of, external resources, either fractional or contract or agencies to help them as and when needed.
Thank you, Jon. That's very comprehensive. And I agree with you. I feel like, Tom, listening to Jon there, and I was kind of slightly pre-armed by this because he hadn't had a coffee last week and we talked all about this. It feels that the kind of underlying word of this is agility, or flexibility, and those kind of like those big fixed costs. And I don't want to talk as a cost, but big fixed resources or investments, maybe is the best way to regard it, are not so suited to where we are right now. And therefore, we're looking at different variations on the theme of agility. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, what's and Jon's again spot on. There is definitely a rise in fractional hiring at the moment. I mean, contracting has been around for as long as I can remember. But that's different. Contracting tends to be more reserved to the wording for middle management. What you're seeing, depending on the size of the business, you're seeing a seriously notable surge in fractional requests for senior marketing leaders to come in and parachute in X amount of days per week or per month, depending on the need, and help to shape and instruct smaller marketing teams to execute. Now, yes, okay, we're going to keep coming back to the word AI, and that's making this probably more possible. But the knowledge that senior marketers like Jon have is what's absolutely priceless, because you've seen the changes you've seen through 2, probably Jon, 3 recessions. I'm going to have a stab at a guess. You saw obviously COVID. You've seen those changes. You've witnessed what works and what doesn't. And if you embrace what's happening right now, that makes people like Jon very, very appealing to the market. Now, there is something else I was going to add to this as well, is that more so probably with mid-level tech businesses in particular, what we've also seen where businesses have reduced their marketing teams quite considerably, we're now suddenly seeing a shift on a reliance, which, Jon, you might need to pick me up on this one, but I'm seeing again B2B marketing agencies that we support suddenly seeing growth again. I mean, 2023 2023-4 was bad for the B2B marketing agencies, but we saw it coming down the pipe because in 2023, there was so much redundancies on client side that spend was slowing down. So B2B marketing agencies were struggling, but now you're starting to see a lift again and the market's trend is going up because with clients now reducing their marketing teams, they're more reliant now on external B2B marketing agencies to do delivery and strategy guidance at the same time. But it seems to be, but what I can work out, they're getting big chunks, big campaigns, projects, project-based, but whereas 3 years ago, you might be able to see visibility beyond year 1 and 2. There was more longer-term commitments. Rather now, it's more short, fast, dirty, here's a lump of money. What's the result can I get if I invest this amount of money? And that's what I think I'm seeing at the moment on our side.
So I think that's fantastic, Tom. Thank you. And it's great to hear evidence. There's positivity in this call, which I wasn't necessarily expecting, but I'm very welcome to hear it. And you're both got fantastic opinions. I'd love to talk about it longer, but we've just kind of gone out over our kind of length of time. So I'm going to kind of call the conversation to quits. And maybe we'll recircle back on this one. But I just want to ask you both if you can give me a very quick soundbite about what marketers should do. What does success? What steps can they take to kind of prepare for the future of their careers or take opportunities? I mean, Tom, I suspect you get asked all the time, so I'll ask you this first of all. And Jon can have a think.
Yeah, okay. I'll give you my piece on this one. So the one thing I keep hammering home, and I personally deal more with obviously senior leadership people, is the sort of resumes I see and I talk through. People are very keen to talk about responsibilities and overall what they've done in the industry knowledge. What everyone's crying out for right now, everybody wants growth. Everything is about impact. What impacts have you made? If you're going to consider going into a market, searching for a new opportunity, maybe you are available now or thinking about it. You want to start keeping a case studies of what impacts have you made? Whether it's doesn't even matter if you've been making redundancies, restructuring, whatever you want to call the initiatives you've had to do. You've been there commercially because you had to make an impact, and that's the bit is important. Even if you had to be in a negative position, there's always going to be a positive story there. You've gone through and you've delivered, done these tasks to get this result. And that's what people need to be doing more, shouting more about impact.
Marketers need to understand their audience. I mean, what an amazing concept that we should have talk about marketers understanding their audience. But very, very wise words, Tom. Jon, really quickly, anything you could add to what Tom?
3 things, absolutely. Link what you're doing to the impact to the business. So always think about that, because that's that's what people are looking for. I think secondly, if you're in a role or you're sort of you're thinking about developing your career, it is about being curious and showing your curiosity and sort of bringing in new ideas and learning ideas. And then the third thing, I think, what my learning is out of all of this, it is about communication skills, crazy for marketers, and about the confidence. So think about how you can confidently tell the story about yourself and have a story and work on that. And then if you're in a company, you can obviously leverage some kind of structure to do that. So those are 3 things I'd think about.
Fantastic. It's been a great conversation. Really fascinating to talk to you both. And we really explored, this is for me is the biggest thing that's going. This is a fundamental shift that's going on, but good to know it's not quite as bad as some people, some naysayers might say. Thank you both so much for your time. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you again, Joel. Take care.
Joel.
Before you go, a quick word about what's coming up next on the Trust and Influence in B2B podcast. The 2026 Edelman Trust Barometer has just landed, and the findings should concern every B2B marketer. 70% of people globally now have what Edelman calls an insular trust mindset. They're unwilling to trust anyone who doesn't share their values, their culture, or their worldview. Trust is retreating institutions into ever smaller circles, and yet business has emerged as the most trusted institution in the world, and the only one the majority believes is actually doing something about it. So what does this mean for you? In the next episode, I'm joined by Andrew Mildren of Edelman Business Marketing to unpack the findings, explore what trust brokering means in practice, and get into what B2B marketers should be doing differently as a result. It's a conversation you won't want to miss. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it, and I'll see you next time.